Good morning again. Before I go on to the readings of the day, I'd like to share with you an info on how we choose the readings on a Sunday. Sunday's reading is guided upon what is known as dominical guidelines. Dominical comes from the Latin word dominus, meaning our Lord Jesus Christ. So that the Sunday readings, first, second, and the Gospel of the day, are chosen. And the focus, the center of the reading is about Jesus Christ, our Lord. That's why it's called Dominical. Say, for instance, today, 20th Sunday in ordinary time. But there are Sundays that the readings for the Lord is replaced by the readings of saints, such as today. Today is the feast of the Assumption of Our Lady. Now we go into the feast of Our Lady. I wonder if you've seen or been to or joined the pilgrimage in north of Spain. Compostela de Santiago, or it could be Santiago de Compostela. That's right. Our patron saint, Saint James. The Spanish word for that is Santiago. Jan is actually the Spanish word for James. And if you have witnessed that, thousands and thousands of people would walk for miles from their home place, towns, provinces, and countries. And they would go all the way to Compostela to be at the tomb of St. James. And you'd be more fascinated if you get to know those who are walking along the way. Because some of them would be walking for weeks just so they could be at the tomb of St. James on his feast day, which was not too long ago. Or you probably were in Rome and see the pilgrimage or the pilgrims going to visit the tomb of St. Paul or St. Peter, the Pope. We do that as Christians. We visit those who are close to our hearts. Now the question is, have you ever been to the tomb of Mary? Do you know which country her tomb is located? Is it in Turkey? Is it in Egypt? Or is it in Israel? Or none of the above? That's right. And that is the reason why we have this feast, the Assumption of Our Lady. That feast, it's not an old that goes all the way to the New Testament or the Old Testament. It's relatively new. It was proclaimed as a teaching of the Catholic Church by Pope Pius XII way back in 1950. And the doctrine is that when Mary died, her body and soul went up to heaven. And that is the basis of our feast day today, the Assumption of Our Lady. Let me share with you what I learned from my mom. When I was like 3 or 4 years old, I would usually go to Mass every day with my mom, and that's when my mom would teach me and tell me about Mary. I have told you this before, that my mom would call Mary as Mama Mary. And for a while I thought that if my mom would call Mary Mama Mary, so she must be my grandma, my Lula. And then, close to the Feast of the Assumption, my mom would teach us in her own way, relate to us like the first reading of the day. Remember the first reading of the day? The fight between the dragon and the child? So we grow up with that. As a child, we accept everything my mom would teach us. No question asked. So when my mother would tell us about that, there were like nights after that me and my brother would go out, like clear evening like that, and we look up the sky, hoping to see the fight between the dragon and the child, and the flashes of lights. After a while, my mom would come out and said, "You're not going to see that because it's a clear evening." That was it. Sometimes we go out when it's cloudy. We hope to see the flashes of lights here and there when, yes, the dragon fighting the child. My mom would come out and say, "You're not going to see it, it's cloudy." But that's how it is. You learn things from your mom. Same thing with me. And the teaching of my mom is just what Pope Pius XII taught, that Mary, body and soul, went up to heaven. That was my understanding until I was sent to University of St. Thomas in Manila, St. Thomas Aquinas in Rome, and the Gregorian University in Rome. And then we had someone from the U.S., a theologian, but he belonged to the Anglican Church, a Protestant church, Reverend Reginald Fuller, a theologian. And he said to us, "Well, for one, I do not commit to the teaching of the Pope." But he was allowed to give us a lecture because of his theological and, yes, the biblical basis of the assumption. He said, but he said to us, "I do believe in the assumption that Mary went up to heaven." It may be a different way that we understand the assumption, because for us, it's body and soul. Mary went up to heaven. But for some Protestants, to them, Mary went up to heaven. Because of what? This is the basis of our celebration today. Because if we see Mary alone as is, Mary is nothing, nobody. But if you put Mary with Jesus, that's when you begin to believe the assumption of Mary. How could you not believe in the assumption of Mary? Because this was the Mary that Angel Gabriel came down and announced that she would become the mother of Jesus. Try to imagine that. Try to imagine Mary, a young woman without a husband, would be bearing the child Jesus. How could she? For us, many of us would think that there's that heavenly, graceful Mary accepting the announcement of or by Angel Gabriel. But in my simple mind, Mary looked like confused. Confused because how could she be a mother of a child without a father, without a husband? But Mary accepted this. And then fast forward that and walk with Mary. Walk with Mary along the way of the cross. Mary walked with Jesus. Mary witnessed Jesus crucified on the cross, died on the cross. That's the special role of Mary in what is known as the economy of salvation. For this reason, Mary is very close to us, very close to me and my mom. Mary came down to talk to many of us. You probably had been to Knox in Ireland, where Mary appeared to a number of people. You probably had been to Fatima and Lourdes. If I may, I would like to share with you my personal experience while in my first trips to Lourdes. I would usually go down and be at the area of Lourdes early in the morning, 5 o'clock, 6. And one day I saw a woman kneeling down, walking down to the statue of Mary. And then as she was approaching where I was sitting, I could actually see both knees bleeding. So I stood up, went to this woman and tried to get her up. And by way of conversation, I said to this woman, "You must be asking a great deal from Our Lady. I could see your blood on your knees." Said, "Oh, this is nothing. I'm here not to pray for favor. I'm here to thank Our Lady for, yes, listening to what I prayed for." I was touched by that. It's always clear in my mind. Our Lady Fatima, Our Lady of Lourdes. But lately, have you ever heard of Our Lady speaking to a Japanese woman? A nun. Yes. This is a recent, story about Our Lady. She spoke to a nun, but strikingly and interestingly, the nun, Japanese, is deaf, could not hear anything. But Our Lady spoke to the nun. Boy, this Mama Mary is multilingual. He could speak Japanese, huh? Could be Chinese or Russian or Afghanistan. But the point is, Our Lady comes down to us because she wants us to be with Him in heaven. That's a good reason for us to be in heaven, so that when we go up and we see Our Lady, the assumption of Our Lady would be fulfilled. And lastly, I see young ones among us. Could I ask the parents of the young ones, could you teach them how to pray the Rosary, please? Teach them how to pray the Hail Mary and Holy Mary. Because if you don't, they will not learn to have devotion to Our Lady. I am speaking to you in my experience in going with the kids, as old as 5th and 6th graders, for a catechism here and in other parishes. Many of our kids cannot even pray the Hail Mary and the Holy Mary. So please, teach them how to pray the Rosary. It's important that you as parents would teach them, guide them to pray. And for all of us, my personal request is that, yes, we say the Rosary here every day. I don't expect you to come every day, but maybe once a week or once a month, once a year, come and pray with us the Holy Rosary. Let us all pray to Mama Mary, especially in this time of need, pandemic. Our Lady is a powerful, saint for all of us.